Welcome back, everyone. Today we're going deep, deep, deep into the world of human behavior.
Decoding people, huh?
Exactly. We're going to crack open, read people like a book, this fascinating book by Patrick King.
Ah, yes. I've heard good things about this one.
It's seriously mind-blowing. And trust me, it's way more engaging than your typical psychology textbook.
More exciting than a textbook. All right, you've got my attention.
Have you ever met those people who just get others? Like they have some sort of sixth sense?
Oh, yeah, those folks who seem to read minds. Definitely.
We're diving into the secrets behind that, using psychology, good old observation, and dare I say, a touch of Sherlock Holmes.
Sounds intriguing. So we're all becoming detectives today.
Absolutely. And the best part, anyone can learn this.
So it's not just about body language and those obvious tells.
You got it. This book dives deep into the psychology that drives our actions.
Fascinating. So where do we even begin with this whole reading people thing?
Well, King starts with a simple idea. Everyone, and I mean everyone, is constantly trying to seek pleasure and avoid pain.
Makes sense. It's like that basic instinct for survival and well-being.
Exactly. But King takes this concept even further with his crazy example about chapulins.
Chapulins. You mean those grasshoppers people eat?
Yep, those. He uses it to highlight how our perception of what's pleasurable or painful matters more than the actual reality.
So what might seem totally repulsive to one person can be a delicacy to another?
Exactly. It's all about personal experiences, values, you name it. And this is crucial for reading people because their motivations might not always be obvious to us.
So something that seems totally irrational to me might make perfect sense to someone else based on their own unique perspective.
You got it. It's like figuring out their personal code, understanding what makes them tick.
I'm starting to see how this all ties together. So how do we actually start to understand someone's motivations better?
Well, this is where things get really interesting. King brings in Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Remember that pyramid?
Oh, yeah, from Psych 101. Basic needs at the bottom, self-actualization at the top.
Right. And King uses this framework to explain how our needs evolve as we grow and how different needs might be driving a person's actions at any given time.
So someone who's struggling to make ends meet might act very differently from someone who's already achieved financial security and is now focused on, say, creative pursuits.
Exactly. There are different points on that pyramid, so their motivations and priorities will naturally differ. It's like everyone's climbing their own personal mountain.
Okay, I'm starting to see how this can be helpful in understanding people better.
And it's not just about understanding, it's about knowing how to interact with people more effectively.
So if I'm trying to motivate my team at work, I should consider where each person is on that pyramid and tailor my approach accordingly.
Precisely. Someone who's driven by a sense of belonging might thrive in a collaborative environment, while someone who's more focused on achievement might respond better to individual recognition.
This is eye-opening stuff. So we've got this idea of understanding motivation through pleasure and pain, then layering on Maslow's hierarchy to see what needs are driving a person's actions. Is there anything else we need to consider?
Well, the book doesn't stop there. King dives into something called the shadow self. It's a concept from Jungian psychology.
The shadow self sounds a bit mysterious, maybe even a little spooky.
It's not about being spooky. It's actually quite fascinating. The shadow self represents those parts of ourselves that we repress or deny, the traits we deem unacceptable or undesirable.
So, like our dark side, those aspects of our personality we'd rather not acknowledge.
In a way, yes. And here's the catch. We often project those shadow traits onto others instead of earning them ourselves.
That's interesting. So if I'm constantly judging someone for being selfish, it might be because I'm struggling with my own selfishness but haven't fully acknowledged it.
Bingo. Or if you find yourself getting irrationally angry at someone for being controlling, maybe it's because you're suppressing your own need for control. It's like our shadow is whispering in our ear, influencing our perceptions of others.
Wow, I never thought of it that way. So the shadow self can be a powerful tool for understanding not only others, but also ourselves.
Exactly. By recognizing those projected traits, we can gain valuable insights into our own hidden motivations and insecurities. It's like holding up a mirror to our own psyche, seeing those parts of ourselves we'd rather keep hidden.
This is blowing my mind. So how do we actually start to spot these shadow projections in others? What are some signs to look out for?
It's about paying close attention to those knee-jerk reactions. Those moments when you feel an intense emotional response to someone's behavior.
So like when I get really triggered by someone's actions or words.
Exactly. Ask yourself, why am I reacting this way? Could it be that this person is mirroring something I dislike in myself but haven't fully dealt with?
Okay, so we're not just observing others, we're also using their behavior as a mirror to reflect on our own inner world.
Absolutely. And it's not about blaming ourselves or getting caught up in self-criticism. It's about using this awareness to grow and evolve, both personally and in our relationships with others.
I love that. It's like turning those judgmental moments into opportunities for self-discovery and deeper understanding. This is powerful stuff.
It is. And it makes you realize how complex human behavior really is.
Yeah.
We've got those basic drives for pleasure and avoiding pain, then Maslow's hierarchy showing us which needs are most pressing, and then this whole shadow self thing potentially influencing how we perceive and interact with others.
It's like we're peeling back the layers of an onion, getting closer and closer to the core of what makes someone tick.
Exactly. But I have to ask, what about all those classic tells we hear about, like body language? Does King address that in the book?
Oh, he definitely does. And he debunks a lot of common myths about body language along the way.
Like the idea that liars always avoid eye contact?
Right. Turns out it's not that simple. Sometimes people avoid eye contact because they're shy, nervous, or simply from a different culture where direct eye contact is considered rude.
Makes sense. So we can't just rely on one single cue to interpret someone's behavior.
Exactly. King stresses the importance of looking for clusters of behavior, not just isolated gestures. He introduces this concept called thin slicing, which basically means making quick judgments based on limited information.
Kind of like how a detective scans a crime scene for clues.
Precisely. But instead of looking for fingerprints or DNA, we're looking for subtle cues in someone's posture, facial expressions, and gestures. But here's the key. Context is everything. A single gesture doesn't mean much on its own. You need to consider the whole picture, the person's personality, the situation, and their overall demeanor.
So we're not just looking for a single tell, but rather a pattern of behavior that might reveal something deeper.
Exactly. It's about becoming a keen observer of human behavior, noticing those subtle nuances that others might miss.
So we're training ourselves to be more like Sherlock Holmes, paying attention to those tiny details that can reveal a whole story.
That's the spirit, and that brings us to one of the most fascinating aspects of King's book, his exploration of microexpressions.
Microexpressions, I've heard of those. Aren't those fleeting, involuntary facial movements that can betray someone's true feelings?
You got it. They happen so fast that most people don't even notice them, but they can be incredibly revealing, especially if someone is trying to mask their true emotions.
It's like when you see those slow-motion replays of athletes reacting to a win or a loss. Even if they're trying to maintain their composure, you can see those split-second expressions of pure joy or disappointment flash across their faces.
Precisely. And those microexpressions can give us a glimpse into someone's true emotional state, even if they're trying to hide it.
Okay, now I'm picturing myself watching every conversation in slow motion, trying to analyze every twitch and blink. It's a bit overwhelming, to be honest.
It doesn't have to be overwhelming. It's about developing your awareness and paying attention to those subtle cues. You don't need to become a microexpression expert overnight.
So it's more about being present, being observant, and noticing those subtle signals that might be flying under the radar.
Exactly. And as you practice, you'll start to pick up on these microexpressions more naturally without needing to overanalyze everything.
So we're essentially training ourselves to become more attuned to the nonverbal language of emotions. It's like learning a whole new vocabulary.
Precisely. And once you start understanding that language, you'll be amazed at what you can learn about the people around you.
Wow, we've covered so much ground already. From understanding motivations and the shadow self to deciphering body language and microexpressions, it feels like we're just scratching the surface of this whole reading people thing.
We've only just begun. There's so much more to explore in King's book, and trust me, it gets even more fascinating as we delve deeper.
I'm already hooked.
I knew you would be. You know, we've been talking about all these subtle cues and those fascinating micro-expressions, but have you ever noticed how sometimes you just get a vibe from someone?
Oh, totally. Like you meet someone new and instantly you kind of get a sense of their personality before they've even said much. It's almost like intuition, but is there like a scientific explanation for that?
There might be. King dives into this whole concept of personality type.
Oh, yeah. We've all taken those online quizzes, right?
Yeah.
Myers-Briggs, all that stuff. But is that really reliable?
Well, King argues that while those quizzes might be for fun, those systems like Myers-Briggs and the Big Five can actually give us some useful insights.
Okay, interesting. So instead of just focusing on individual quirks, we can start to see how certain traits fit into bigger patterns.
Right. And those patterns can actually help us to predict how someone might react in certain situations.
So it's less about putting people in boxes and more about understanding those broader tendencies.
Exactly. Like if we know someone tends towards introversion, that might explain why they seem drained after a big party or need quiet time to recharge.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
But wouldn't that lead us to jump to conclusions? Like, if someone's introverted, do we just assume they hate parties?
Well, that's where the real skill of reading people comes in. These personality types are just a starting point, kind of like a framework for understanding.
Got it, got it.
The real magic happens when we combine that knowledge with careful observation, looking for those individual nuances that make each person unique.
So it's like we're using those personality systems as a lens, but still paying attention to the specific details.
Precisely. And, King mentions this fascinating research by this psychologist, Sam Gosling.
Oh, yeah. What did he study?
Well, he looked at how people's bedrooms reflect their personalities.
Wait, seriously, you can tell a lot about someone just by looking at their bedroom.
Apparently so. According to his research, conservatives tend to have neater, more organized spaces with more conventional decor, while liberals, on the other hand, tend to have more books and a more eclectic style.
Wow. So if someone's a minimalist, I might think twice before inviting them over to my cluttered bohemian studio.
Right. And it's not a foolproof system, of course, but it's fascinating to see how our personalities can show up in all these unexpected ways.
Totally. It's making me look at my surroundings completely differently now.
That's the fun part. It's like we're surrounded by clues, and if we know how to read them, we can get these fascinating insights into the people around us.
This is so cool. But let's be honest, one of the most intriguing parts of reading people has got to be lie detection. Like, is there a magic formula for spotting a liar?
We all wish there was, right? We've seen those movies where the detective knows someone is lying just by their body language, but King actually debunks a lot of those myths.
So there's no single tell that guarantees someone's being dishonest.
Unfortunately not. Lie detection is way more nuanced than that. It's about looking at the whole picture, considering all those subtle cues and inconsistencies.
Okay, that makes sense. So what are some things we should be paying attention to if we want to get better at spotting lies?
Well, one surprising truth King highlights is that truth tellers are often more comfortable saying, "I don't know."
Really? Why is that?
Well, they're not afraid to admit uncertainty. A liar, on the other hand, might try to overcompensate with these elaborate stories to cover their tracks.
So someone who's telling the truth doesn't feel the need to fabricate all these details.
Exactly. And King also mentions that liars often use more formal language, avoiding contractions, almost like they're trying too hard to sound credible.
Oh, interesting. Like they're reciting a script rather than having a natural conversation.
Right. And they might avoid personal pronouns too, trying to distance themselves from their statements.
Okay, so it's about paying attention to those subtle shifts in language and tone. But how can we actually spot these cues in real time? It seems like we'd need to be constantly analyzing everything someone says.
Well, King suggests a technique called increasing cognitive load.
What does that mean?
It's about asking unexpected questions or getting the person to elaborate on details. Liars tend to get flustered more easily under pressure, so they're more likely to slip up when they have to think on their feet.
Ah, so we're basically throwing them off balance, making it harder for them to keep their story straight.
Exactly. But of course, we want to use this technique ethically. It's not about trying to trap people or make them feel uncomfortable.
Right. It's about being observant and noticing those subtle inconsistencies, not about turning into a human lie detector.
Exactly. And, this whole idea of reading people isn't just about detecting deception. It's also about understanding how social conditioning shapes our behaviors and communication styles.
Oh, that's a good point, like how our culture and upbringing influence how we interact with others.
Precisely. For instance, someone raised in a culture where direct eye contact is considered disrespectful might come across as shifty or evasive, even if they're being completely honest.
That's so true. We can't just assume everyone follows the same social norms or interprets body language the same way.
Right. So we need to be aware of our own biases and assumptions, recognizing that our personal experiences color how we perceive the world.
So it's about being open-minded and realizing that different cultures have different ways of communicating.
Absolutely. And that brings us to one of the most important skills for reading people: empathy.
Empathy, yeah. It's about putting ourselves in someone else's shoes. Right?
Exactly. It's about trying to understand their perspective, their background, their experiences, and recognizing that their behavior might be coming from a place we haven't even considered.
That makes a lot of sense. But empathy sounds great in theory, but how do we actually put it into practice?
Well, King suggests practicing active listening, really focusing on what the other person is saying, both their words and their nonverbal cues, without interrupting or imposing our judgments.
So instead of just waiting for our turn to speak, we're fully present, trying to understand the emotions behind their words.
Exactly. And another technique is perspective taking. Consciously trying to see the situation from their point of view, considering their background and motivations.
Okay, so it's about making an effort to understand where they're coming from, even if their perspective is totally different from our own.
Precisely. And that's where the real power of reading people lies. It's not about judging or labeling, it's about connecting on a deeper level.
I love that. It's about building understanding and creating more meaningful relationships. So we've covered a lot of ground here, from personality types and lie detection to the importance of empathy and understanding cultural differences.
We have. And all of this is really setting the stage for the practical techniques King outlines for actually applying this knowledge in our everyday interactions.
Oh, yeah. I'm excited to hear more about that. Like, what are some specific things we can do to become better people readers?
Well, King suggests a fascinating approach that involves asking indirect questions. Instead of asking someone directly about their values or beliefs, we can frame those questions in a way that allows them to reveal those things more naturally through their responses.
I remember you mentioning this earlier. It's like a sneaky way of unlocking those hidden truths without making people feel interrogated.
Exactly. It's a much more subtle and effective approach.
Okay, so we've talked about personality types, lie detection, social conditioning, even those super fast micro expressions. What else can we add to our people reading toolkit?
Well, King really emphasizes mastering the art of observation.
Observation, huh? So like paying attention.
Yeah, but it's more than that. It's about becoming really attuned to those subtle cues people give off, not just what they say.
So like their body language, facial expressions, how their tone of voice changes.
Exactly. It's about noticing those inconsistencies between their words and their nonverbal cues, because that can tell us a lot.
Well, like when someone says they're excited about a project, but their voice is all flat and they're slouching.
Exactly. That mismatch could mean they're not being totally honest or have some reservations they're not voicing.
It's like when someone's smile doesn't reach their eyes. You can just tell something's off.
Right. Those incongruences can be really valuable clues. It might prompt you to ask a clarifying question or just offer a listening ear.
So we're like detectives, looking for those subtle hints that reveal the truth beneath the surface.
Love that analogy. And one area where this is super helpful is body language.
Oh yeah, body language. We all know the basics, like crossed arms, meaning someone's closed off, or fidgeting, meaning they're nervous.
But there are subtler cues too. Like, have you ever noticed how people tend to mirror the body language of those they feel comfortable with?
Interesting. So if someone is subconsciously copying my posture, it could mean they feel at ease with me.
Exactly. It's a way of building rapport, showing empathy. On the flip side, if someone turns their body away or avoids eye contact, it could mean they're uncomfortable or maybe even distrustful.
It's like their body's sending a message, even if they're not saying anything.
Exactly. But remember, context matters a lot. We need to consider the person's personality and the situation before jumping to conclusions.
So a single gesture doesn't always have the same meaning for everyone.
Right. We need to piece together all those nonverbal clues, kind of like a puzzle.
Okay, so body language is important. But what about when people speak? Any tips for decoding their words?
Oh, absolutely. King talks about reading between the lines, paying attention to not just what people say, but how they say it.
So like their tone of voice, the specific words they choose?
Exactly. Even the silences in a conversation can be revealing.
The silences, really?
Yeah, those pauses, those hesitations, they can tell us a lot. It could be uncertainty, discomfort, maybe even an attempt to hide something.
Wow, it's like those dramatic pauses in a movie where the unspoken tension is palpable.
Exactly. Sometimes what people don't say is just as important as what they do say.
Okay, so body language, verbal cues, even those pregnant pauses. We're getting pretty good at this. Are there any other techniques we can add to our arsenal?
Well, remember those indirect questions we talked about? King is a huge advocate for those.
Oh yeah, those are brilliant. Instead of asking someone directly about their beliefs or values, we frame the question in a way that lets them reveal themselves more naturally.
Precisely. It bypasses those defenses people put up, allowing them to be more authentic.
Do you have another example of how to use an indirect question? I love that one about saving things from a fire.
Sure. Imagine you want to understand someone's priorities. Instead of asking, what's most important to you, you could say, if you could only have 3 wishes, what would they be?
Oh, that's good. Their answer would tell you a lot about what they truly desire, their hopes and dreams.
Exactly. And because it's not a direct question, they're more likely to open up and give you a genuine answer.
This is incredible. We've learned so much today about understanding motivations, reading body language, and decoding verbal cues. But for me, the biggest takeaway is that reading people isn't about judging them or trying to control them.
I completely agree.
It's about understanding, connecting, building those genuine relationships.
Couldn't have said it better myself. It's about recognizing that everyone has a story, a journey that shaped them into who they are. And by listening with an open heart, we can learn so much, not just about others, but about ourselves too.
This deep dive has truly been eye-opening. I feel like I'm seeing the world in a whole new light now.
And as you go out there and start practicing these techniques, remember to stay curious, stay open-minded, and always approach people with respect and genuine interest. The art of reading people is a lifelong journey of discovery, and there's always something new to learn.
Well said. Thank you so much for sharing your insights with us today. It's been an absolute pleasure.
The pleasure was all mine. Happy observing.